Lyddie, Chapter 6, Ezekiel. With one leg over the window-sill and her body pressed up under the window frame, there seemed to be no way to run. But why should she run? It was her house after all. And what was one measly man, black or white, compared to a bear? Besides, she broke into a cold sweat. This man was likely to be worth $100. Keeping her eyes on the intruder as though he were a bear, she managed to get her left foot across the sill and straighten herself into sitting position on the window ledge. Pretending courage seemed to manufacture it, so she was just about to open her mouth to ask the man who he was and what he was doing in her house when he spoke to her. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that entereth not by the door, but climbeth up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. His voice was deep and smooth, almost like thick brushed fur. She knew his words were from the Bible, but she was so astonished by the music of them that she sat there open-mouthed, unable to protest, but whatever he might be, she was no thief. Never fear, little miss, my heart assures me that you're neither a thief nor a robber. No, she said, and then louder to show her authority, I'm mistress here. Ah, he said, we meet at last. You must be Miss Lydia Worthen, my hostess. Forgive my intrusion. How do you know my name, eh? She had meant to ask his, or at least what he was doing in her house, but, as before, he had gotten the better of her in his fancy talk and quick mind. Brother Stevens, he said, he felt that you would be understanding. He glanced at her, and for the first time since he had spied her at the window, his expression seemed uncertain. I hoped he was not mistaken. He smiled unapologetically. Here, do you come down from there and share a cup of tea with me? You've had a long journey, I'd imagine, and a rude shock, finding your home occupied by a stranger. What else could she do? She took the hand he held out, to her surprised by its roughness, and his skin looked like satin in the dim light. He helped her to the floor. She followed as he led her to the rocker, and then and then she sat perched on the edge of her chair as he handed her a cup of birch tea. Why hadn't she spied smoke coming up the road? But the man's fire was teeny, so that perhaps no one was to see. The cabin was cold, though warmer than the outdoors. The man poured himself a cup and pulled up a stool on the other side of the fireplace to sit down facing her. You've come from the village, he said. She nodded. The man could hardly be a runaway slave. He talked like a congregational preacher, but he was hiding, and that was plain. I should introduce myself, he said, reading her mind. I'm Ezekiel Abernathy, or was so called formally. I was on the way northward when the snow delayed me last November. He was a fugitive. I was conveyed to Brother Stephen's farm, where I stayed until it became clear that someone was watching their farm. That was when young Luke sprinted me here. He thought your log pile at the door would discourage curiosity. We'd done it to keep out the critters. Yes, he said, and you succeeded. I've been quite safe here from the wild ones. He took a sip of tea, keeping his eyes on the rim of the cup. So far. He glanced up at her. I could have left at once, but I was inconveniently ill, and the cold in my lungs has been slow to clear. You talk like a preacher. He relaxed a little. Well, I am, or rather I was. Then you ain't a slave? Some have considered me a slave. But you talk nice. She hadn't meant to put it that way, but it had come out unthought. He smiled. So do you. No, she said. I mean, you've had schooling. I was my own schoolmaster, he said. At first, I only wanted to read the Bible so I could preach to my people. But, he smiled again, showing his lovely, even teeth, a little reading is exceedingly dangerous thing. Reading the Bible? Especially the Bible, he said. It gave me notions. So you just left, eh? Just set out walking. He leaned his head back, remembering. Something like that, he said, but she could tell from his eyes that it was nothing like that at all. I couldn't leave my home, she said. No, and yet you did. I had no choice, she said hotly. I was made to. So many slaves, he said softly. I ain't a slave, she said. Just what? There was debt by my father, that he left. So, whatever she said only made it seem worse. But we own the land. We freemen of the state of Vermont. He looked at her. Well, my father was, or until he left, and my brother will be. But Charlie was at school, living with strangers. She hated the man for making her think this way. I left the only home I knew, he said quietly. I left a wife and a child behind, vowing I would send for them or come for them within a few months. And here I sit, sick and penniless, hiding from my life, totally dependent on the kindness of others for everything. He shook his head, and she was sorry he had had a moment's hate of him. Somewhere, perhaps, her father was saying those very same words. After a while he stood up. "Can I offer you a little rabbit stew?" he said. "I'm afraid that's about all I have at this moment. Brother Luke will be coming up tonight with more food, I think. But if you're hungry—" "I have some bread and cheese," she said. "A veritable feast," he said, in good humor, returned. "When I first saw you, they were eating, and somehow she needed to let him know. I thought—" But she was ashamed to finish her sentence. "It's a lot of money," he said gently. "I'd be tempted myself if I were you." She could feel herself go hot and red. "But I won't," she said fiercely. "Now I know you. I could never." "Thank you," he said. "A compliment as beautiful as the giver." "It's dark in here," Lyddie said, "or you could see that I'm plain as sod." Or lovely as the earth. He used such fancy words, but she knew he wasn't using fancy words to make fun of her. Luke did come in the night, but she had slept so soundly that she didn't hear him. The proof was the odor of porridge bubbling over the fire when she awoke. She had slept in her clothes and scrambled down the lofted ladder at once. "Ah, a sleeper awaketh." "It's late," she said. "I have to go." But he made her wait long enough to eat. It was a strange goodbye. She did not hope to see Ezekiel again. She hoped that he would cross the border fast as a fox, far away from the snares of those who would trap him. How could she have imagined for 1 minute she could betray him? "I hope you get to Canada safe," she said, "and I hope your family can join you real soon." And then, without even thinking, she thrust her hand into her pocket and held out to him the calf money bag. "You might need something along the way," she said. The coins jangled as she passed them over. "But this is yours. You'll need it. You earned it." "No," she said, "I didn't earn it. It came from selling the calf. I was only going to bury it until it was needed." "Well, think of it as a loan, then," he asked. "When I get established, I'll send it to you, care of the Stevensons, with interest if I can. There's no hurry. Wait until your family comes. I don't know when my brother and I can ever get back." She felt leaden with sadness. She pushed the stool to the window and climbed up. He held the window open, and she climbed out. Someone, Luke perhaps, had left a short ladder in place. "I can never thank you, my friend," Ezekiel said. "It was half Stevens's calf by rights," she said, trying to diminish the both of them in their enormity of what she had done. "It was their bull." "I hope you can find freedom as well, Miss Lydia," he said. It wasn't until she was well down the road that she began to figure out what he had meant. And he was right. At the Cutlers, despite Tryphenia's friendship, she was no more than a slave. She worked from dawn until well after dark, and what did she have to show for it? She was no closer to paying off the debt and coming home than she'd been a year ago. She needed cash money for that. She needed work that would pay and pay well, and there was only one place in New England where a girl could get good cash wage for her work, and that was in Lowell, in the mills. The weather held, and the trip back was mostly downhill, so she was back by early afternoon. She hung the unused snowshoes in the shed and the lunch bucket in the pantry before she entered the warm kitchen. "So, you've decided to honor us with a visit." The mistress's face was red with heat or rage. Behind her, Tryphenia grimaced an apology. She stood in the doorway, trying to frame an excuse or an apology, but the words did not come quickly enough to her mind. "You're dismissed," the woman said. "The best one you've ever had," Tryphenia muttered. "Unless—" "No," Lydia said quickly. "I know I've done wrong to go off where I was when you wasn't here. I'll collect my things and be gone, eh?" "You're wearing my dress." "Yes, ma'am. Shall I wash it before I go, or—" "Don't be impertinent." Lyddie went past the angry woman without a word and up the back staircase to her tiny, windowless room. She pulled off the calico dress and put on the tight homespun, but it was like laying off a great burden. She felt more lightened than she had since the day Miss Peck brought her the letter. Tryphenia had followed her up. Just stay out of sight today. By tomorrow she'll come to her senses. She knows you're the best worker she'll likely ever get, and at no price at all. Why, she sends your mother 50 cents per week, and then only if I remind her. I'm going to be a factory girl, Tryphenia. You what? I'm free. She set me free. I can do anything I want. I can go to Lowell and make some real money to pay off the debt so I can go home. But your brother, he'll be all right. He's in a good place where he's cared for. They're even letting him go to school. How will you get to Massachusetts? You've no money for coach fare. I'll walk, she said proudly. A person should walk to freedom. A person's feet will get mighty sore, muttered Tryphenia.